Whatever was the origin of humanity, whether single or multiple, they were wanderers, explorers, from the first. Necessity compelled them to be familiar with the environment and its resources, and as the race multiplied, emigration became compulsory. The more that relics of primitive humanity are brought to light, the further BC must man's earliest wanderings be dated. The 5,000 years of the old biblical chronology must be multiplied 100 times, and still we find that 500,000 years ago our primitive forebearers must have traveled far from the cradle of the race. They were unconscious geographers. Their conceptions of the earth and of its place in the universe are unknown to us, yet it may be said that certain root ideas of geographical theory and practice must surely date from the earliest period of our species' capacity for observation. Thus, the necessity for describing or following a particular direction presupposes the establishment of a definite standard. The face would be turned towards the position of some familiar object, then in that direction and the opposite, and to the right hand and the left, four such standards would be found, and would be seen the cardinal points. The value, for this purpose, of so patent a phenomenon as the rising and setting of the sun must have been impressed upon human intelligence at an elementary stage. Again, map-making is not very far removed from a primitive instinct. America was discovered countless years before Columbus stumbled against the New World, or even the Norsemen had set foot in Vineland. It had time, before the Spaniards swarmed over it, to be seen the seat of civilizations whose origin is far beyond knowledge. It is worth noticing for our particular purpose that the European conquerors found evidence of highly developed geographical methods both in Central America and in Peru. The native maps were intelligible to them, and the Peruvian Incas had even evolved the idea of relief maps. The history of Europe dawns in the Eastern Mediterranean, and so does the history of geography. It has, however, to be premised that connection existed, in very early times, between the Eastern Mediterranean circle, and the lands far beyond. When princes of Iranian stock are found established on the confines of the Levant as early as the 15th century BC, it may be realized that the known radius from the Mediterranean center was no short one. It appears that a central power became established in Crete about the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, and that an active oversea trade was developed in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean during the ensuing 1,000 years. The Phoenicians, next taking the lead in Mediterranean maritime trade, must have extended knowledge of the inhabited world, even though they left the reputation of secretiveness in respect of their excursions, a natural and not uncommon characteristic of pioneer traders. A Semitic people, they seem to have emigrated from the Persian Gulf in detachments, and established independent settlements on the Levantine littoral. Tyre was their chief trading city. They provided the commercial link between East and West. Their penetration of the Western Mediterranean, and even of the Straits of Gibraltar, is assigned to the earliest period of their activities. They established relations not only with the Greeks and other Mediterranean peoples, but also with European traders. They are said to have dealt in amber brought from the Baltic overland to the Adriatic and to the mouth of the Rhone. Thence they carried their enterprises far to the north. If they did not actually exploit the tin of Cornwall, they knew of Britain. The Phoenician navigators sailed down the Red Sea, and in autumn landed on the coast and sowed a crop of wheat. When this was reaped, they started again and made their way south round the Cape of Good Hope, and so northward, entering the Mediterranean in the 3rd year. There is no inherent impossibility in such an expedition, but it led to no direct results. No further effort was made to round the continent for 20 centuries. Information obtained by such means as this cannot have become in any sense the common property of the period. But there would be no mean supply of geographical data at the disposal of traders on the one hand, and at least of a few philosophers and generally well-informed persons on the other, at a period long anterior to that at which it is possible to begin our detailed history. Whatever tendency there may have been on the part of the Phoenicians, and no doubt their predecessors, to preserve their commercial secrets, there is no necessity to suppose that traders in distant lands did not describe these lands to those with whom they immediately dealt. The links in the commercial chain would then become links in a chain of geographical knowledge. Thus we have found geographical knowledge, so far as it is possible to trace its acquisition at all, to have been acquired for purely commercial purposes, and it remained for the Greeks to seek for such knowledge for its own sake.